Hello and welcome to another video about creating your own little journal. Today I want to tell you a bit more about having trackers and using them and what different types of trackers I use in my journals. So we're going to look at how to create some beautiful looking tables, how to use progress bars, and how to use calendar trackers as well. And I will give you a few notes that I think are quite relevant for this type of journaling. So if that sounds interesting to you, then please do stick around and use the chapters if you're interested in something specific. But with that said, let's just get into it and let's get started with the spread that I've prepared. First off, let's start with my spread setup. I generally tend to like to put everything down in pencil that I want to do, at least the outlines, so that I don't have to count while I draw it in with my normal pen, because if I have to count, I will miscount at some point, so it's much easier to just go until my pencil line, and I can always just take them out later. And the second thing that I always try to make sure is that I have my journal lying down really flat. And if I'm in the early part of the journal or in the very late part of the journal, that means that I have to put something underneath it so that I can have it sitting straight and not being bent down on one side. So that's what I've done here, and now we can get started with the title setup, which is very simple for this spread because the focus is not on making this look incredibly beautiful as a spread, but rather on showing you simple elements that are quite easy to draw and that you can use yourself as well. So with that said, let's get into the different tracker types, and let's start out with the first part, which are the tables. For the tables, as I said, I use pencil to mark where to draw my lines, and you have to have your own kind of system of where you want to use the pencil so that you don't have to draw over it, but that you use the pencil more as kind of a border that keeps you inside the area that you want to draw your lines in. The first table that I draw is a very simple one where I just leave all the sides open and I draw it by hand because that makes it not quite as straight and gives it more of a handmade feel in my opinion. So I like that quite a lot. In this case, I'm just going to use a very simple list of books because I do a lot of reading, but of course you can use the table for anything. And I always like to have some number column, so that's why I put one in here as well, so that I can refer to the book by the number and don't have to always spell out the whole title if I use it later on. I use that a lot in my reading journal. For example, when I put down the different animals that I read about in different books, I will just put down the book number and then I don't have to write out the title because I just wouldn't have space in that spread. Anyways, I can also do other kinds of tables, of course, and the second one that I also use quite a lot is the one that is completely closed off and bordered, and that one can be done really nicely with completely straight lines. So I'm gonna use my ruler here and some nice pigment liner because they are quite good in not getting too much color onto the ruler so that I can use it quite well. I always like to draw out those lines from top to bottom so that I don't get any smudges, but you have to be a bit careful when moving your ruler depending on what type of pen you use. And with this one, I'm gonna do a little game table just to keep it different. So with that, we already have two tables that we can use as a tracker of things to do or books to read or games to play or things that we did read or play within the month, which is what I tend to use them for. Of course, you can also use them for series or anything else that you can list in the table format. So I'm taking out all the pencil marks so that my tables are left without them, and that's the first part of that spread basically done. Although I do want to show you one more thing because it's quite nice to have second line highlights. So if you want to make the lines within the table a bit more distinct and more readable, you can use a very soft pen with some thick tip. I really like those ones. And you can just basically draw in every second line so that it gives you a color difference for each line in the table. But as I said, that's quite an optional part, so if you like the look of it, then you can do it. If you don't like it, or if it's too much work, then you can just leave it. It does take a bit of practice to get all the lines to be really straight with those pens. And I also want to say that if you use color markers, you should not go over them with the second pen, because then you will just get smudges and different colors mixing up. So I would recommend just doing it bit by bit, or maybe even using that pen first. But you have to try what works best with your pens that you have, so just have a go at it and you'll see what works and what doesn't. But yeah, that's it for tables. So let's move on to another type of trackers, to the progress bar. In terms of progress bars, there's quite different things that you can do with them. The very basic idea of it is to have something that shows how far you've already gotten with whatever you want to be doing. So it's quite easy to do, because you basically just draw a thick line around something and then decide how many parts your goal should have. So for example, if you want to read 4 chapters in a book, you can just create 4 little boxes that you can basically tick off or fill in, which you can do in different ways, of course. You can either fill them out completely, or you could just use little lines like I'm doing here, or whatever. And since this is all handmade, you can decide yourself how many boxes you want to have and how many you need. So if you only want to read 3 articles on the same time, you can make it the same length, but just make the boxes bigger. And then it looks nice if you have a whole row of goals like this. And that is a quite nice way to visualize your progress and just to keep you motivated to get towards that final goal. I will say that I don't usually use them for books or for reading, because I tend to just do that the way I want to do it and the way I feel like doing it. But I do use them quite a lot for my other goals and in projects like knitting or maybe painting something, where I'm just like trying to keep myself motivated to go ahead and just do it more often. So I think it's quite a nice kind of tracker for something that you want to get more in the habit of. And you basically say, if I do this 5 times, then I will give myself something or whatever. So if you want to do it for more than just a few days, then I like to create like longer snakes of days, basically. So a huge fun shape that I can fill up with colors to reach a certain amount. So I used to do that quite a lot for my step tracking and trying to walk 8,000 steps or 7,000 steps every single day. And I really liked it there, so I figure why not use it for whichever goals you want to track. So I'm gonna create one here that has a full 30 days at the end, or 30 boxes. Of course, one box doesn't have to be a day. It could also be 1,000 words of writing or 10 pages of reading, or whatever you want to have it be. You just have to define it for yourself and basically create a small key so that you know how to fill it in. And you can track, for example, 30 days of reading. I would probably use a calendar for that, but I didn't want to really count the pages, which is what I could also have done with this one. In any case, because you can use different colors, you can also use different kinds of pens to do this, and I still like using just the traditional pencils in different colors. So that's one of the things that I really like to use them for, and I think they're really great to fill it in. I do also like this kind of shape that just gets smaller when going to the top, because it's kind of like walking up a mountain and reaching the top of the mountain, that kind of feeling, and I really enjoy that. But it is quite a bit difficult to get right in drawing it from the beginning, so that is something that I would recommend you definitely count out in pencil and then just draw in once you're sure where the lines have to go, because otherwise it probably won't just end up being the number that you wanted it to be. At least that's how it went for me the first few times. But yeah, those are 2 types of progress bars that I really like and that I use for some things in my planning. So maybe they could be useful for you as well. And with those finished, I think we can head on to the third part of this video, which are the calendar trackers. And those ones, at least the first of them, you will already have seen on my channel if you've watched it any length of time, because I do one of these calendars for my monthly reading tracker every single month. And I use it to basically note down which days I was reading which books. So to get that set up, you of course have to decide which month to go for, and I'm gonna go for September because that's the next one that I have to set up, so it's quite nice if I can just copy it down from here at that point. So for my September, I will check which day it starts on, and then I just basically draw out these little shapes that are all just little squares, and I can write down all the different numbers. If the day of the week is important for you, then you can of course note them down on top of those columns, but most of the time I don't really mind because it's a typical calendar view, so I know which day it is anyway, so I'll just leave it out. Now what I tend to do with my calendar is I tend to do lines through all the days that I was reading a book, and then I have a key on the side of that calendar tracker that tells me which color is which book. But I've also used calendars in a different kind of way for my hobby journal, where I basically write down things that I do for my different hobbies. And for that one, I also use little symbols. So for example, you could use a little pen for days on which you were writing something, or use a little circle to represent wool on days where you were working with that. So I quite like that, to see any patterns that emerge in my behavior. So sometimes I will only be writing on the weekends because it's just too much work during the week. Or maybe I have one week where I really enjoyed listening to an audiobook and working on my knitting project, and then that week will be very full of wool symbols. But for me, it's more showing what I have done than planning out what I'm doing, because I mostly just don't want to stress myself out too much about doing things in my free time. In any case, that's the first kind of calendar, and then we of course also have a second type of calendar, as I said. And that one I'm gonna draw in very, very nice and straight lines again, because that one's gonna be a bit smaller. And so I need it to be quite straight, because otherwise I won't fit stuff in there. This is quite an easy type as well, and in this case I will just do the same month and just do it turned around the other way, but you can turn it whichever way you want, it really doesn't matter. The idea with that one is just to make it smaller and basically to have something like a pixel a day, if you've heard of that. So you have one little square every single day, and then you can color it in different colors. But I just noticed that I made a mistake in preparing this setup, and I have one column too much on the side here. So this is a great point to show you what I do in the case that I have mistakes like this. Because of course you want your journal to look nice, so you have to find some way to hide your mistakes basically. And I have two different options. I have a Tipex, which is just this lovely tool that I can use to just basically put down this white stuff. I'm not quite sure what I would call it in English, but I can put it down here, and then takes away all the lines that are too many, and that works really well if I don't have to write on top of it. But if I do want to write on top of it, another thing that I really like to do is just use the rest of my white sticker paper, because I print my book covers and things like that on sticker paper, and that always leaves me with some kind of border parts that I didn't need, and I have quite a bit left over like that. So I use that to just basically see how big of a piece I need, cut it out, and then I'll just put it on top. And then of course, because it's sticker paper, I can draw on it, I can write on it, I can use it, whatever, to do something else on top. So those are my two favorite ways to deal with any mistakes that I might make. And as you can see, it's not that bad. life goes on and you probably won't even see it that much if you don't look really closely. In any case, for this tracker, I do need a key because I do need some place to write down what the different colors mean for sure. So for this one, I will go with the number of pages read again. Of course, you could also use it to note down how many words you wrote or how many minutes you spent reading or listening or writing or whatever. And I think that's quite nice because you can then also see tendencies again. So let's say during the week I tend to not read as much, so I'll put down 20 pages, 50 pages, and 20 pages again. But then on Sunday I had some more time and I sat down to read for a bit longer and managed to read 100 pages, so that goes in a different color. And then you can imagine how this tracker would look like if you have filled it up completely. And with that, we're already done with the calendars as well. And we have all the different types of trackers that I wanted to show you. I do still have a few more notes though, so let's head on to those. So I know that you can use trackers for whatever you want, but one thing that I think is really important is that most of us will use them for our hobbies. So they should be there to give us some more motivation and they should be fun. They should not be there to stress out about or show how bad you are or anything like that. So set them up in a way that motivates you but that doesn't stress you out, because that's just not worth it and that's not what they're there for. Also, if you're not sure which tracker works for you and if you're just starting out with tracking, try out different types of trackers and then just see which one fits for you and for your needs. And if that changes over time, that's completely normal, so just try out different things and maybe change it if you feel like you need a change. I do need changes in my hobby journal all the time, so that's completely normal, I think. And that's a nice thing about creating your journal yourself. You can do whatever you feel like you need in this moment. And finally, just have fun with it. So come up with more ideas, try something new, change it however you like, and figure out what type of tracker is the right one for you. So basically, my biggest advice with all of this is try it, have fun with it, and don't stress about it. So yeah, that is the spread that I have prepared for you guys to show you the different tracker types, but I also want to show you a few more that I have in my reading journal and my hobby journal so that I can show you a bit more what it could look like. So let's start out with my reading journal, which you already know from my channel, hopefully. And in this one, as I said, I use trackers for my monthly pages. So as one example, I have my February here, which has a huge table for all the books that I read and how much I read of them. It also has a table for anything that I wanted to get from the library and hopefully also got from the library. And as you can see, I have my calendar tracker here that basically has the details on the different books that I read, and these numbers and colors correspond with the numbers that I gave the books up here. So that's what I meant by having numbers to reference them. And that is something I do every single month, and I also have a video on how I set up this tracker and what all the different things mean on this tracker page. So if you're interested in that, I will link that for you as well. In any case, this is my normal monthly page, but of course we also have challenges like Herkiat 3.0, which I'm taking part in. And for that one, I also, of course, have some form of trackers, and basically the challenge itself is a bingo board. So I have set up tables and other kinds of things for each of the challenges that I have to complete for that one, because I think that's quite helpful. And in some cases I don't have a whole table, but I have done something different because it just makes sense for the challenge. And that's what I mean by being creative. You can just basically play around with it and find your own way of setting things up. In this instance, the challenge is about building a whole chain of books, and because of the chain, I decided to always have it jump back and forth between those two basically boxes, and then I can fill them in from top to bottom in the end. So I really like that idea, and it's a bit different, but still quite easy to read, in my opinion. But as I said, it's not just my reading journal, I also have my hobby journal here. I don't share all of this, so I'm gonna just share a few pages, but this one would be one of the progress tracker pages that I was talking about, where I counted my steps, and basically my goal was to have 7,000 steps each day, and every single day gets a different color and a little number, and with that I can fill up the whole bar. Same for calories that I use while walking around, and here I have another calendar tracker with different activities getting different colors and symbols on here as well. So you can use it for a lot of different things if you want to. And I tend to have my general calendars for the month as well. At the moment, I don't do a full calendar anymore because right now I just need a bit more freedom with my time. But I used to do that, so in April I have this whole calendar for my month. And I also have my kind of smaller trackers here where I can just tick off the little boxes to see my progress throughout the month with different goals. So yeah, that's what I use those trackers for. And for me, so far it has worked really nicely, so I hope it works out for you as well. And with that said, we're done with everything that I want to show you for today. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope there was something in here that was useful for you. If you liked it, please let me know. And if you have any more questions about trackers, or also if you have any complete topics that you would be interested in terms of setting up your own journal and getting into journaling, please do let me know, because I'm really happy to do these kinds of videos as well, even though I don't do them as much as my reading videos, because they of course take time and take some effort to plan as well. But it's really fun to make them, and it's really fun to hear other people getting into journaling, because I really love this hobby and I've only started about 2 years ago now. So I can completely understand that it's quite difficult to start out and to find out which way to do it so that it works for you. So that's completely normal, don't worry about it. And I hope you have as much fun journaling as I am having at the moment. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, and I'm happy that you were here. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and go journal something nice for me, okay? Bye!